Sean's been working in operational excellence, I guess, for I'm going to go just over 25 years now. And he was part of the team that won the Shingo Prize at the Abbott site in Longford in 2016. So what Sean's going to look at today is very much around a bit about the journey that they've been on at Abbott, and also about, I mean, very importantly, and I think this is a topic close to a lot of people's hearts, how do we sustain continuous improvement through difficult times, but also over time? So Sean, welcome. Nice to see you again.
Thank you all. How are you?
Very
Uh,
good.
Good. So I'm okay to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, while
Yeah.
you're just before you do, sorry, I should have mentioned. Please do introduce yourself in chat. It's great to know who's here in the room. But also, if you have any questions for Sean, if you put them into the chat function, we can then pick up on those as we progress through the webinar, probably towards the end. So Sean's got about a 20-minute, half an hour presentation. Then there'll be plenty of chance to ask for Sean some questions. Okay, sorry, over to you, Sean.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity. And yeah, this is just anything that you see here isn't new. So I think you as operational excellence practitioners, I think will be well familiar with it all. But it's really just kind of a recap and what I think are some of the important elements to leading lean and operational excellence. Um, and this is just over experience over time. And I'm sure, like everybody else, I'm learning every day, and some of the things that work in the past that mightn't work now. But this is just some of our story in operational excellence, and some of the things that we did. And I suppose it's primary focused on how we can lead some of those journeys. One of the things that I came to late, this was after we won the Shingo Prize in Longford. This was the B Skill model by Peter Hines as part of SA Partners and Burt Butterworth. And actually, this is very much what we did. We started our operational excellence journey in 2012 in Abbott Longford, and we came from kind of zero visual boards. We always had a very, because it was a startup site in 2005, we had a good culture, we had a lot of innovation, we had a young workforce, so we had a lot of the raw ingredients for OPEX, but we weren't structured, we didn't have visual boards, we didn't know what operational excellence was. I came into the role as a technical manager. I'm a chemist by background, into an OPEX role, which I didn't know what OPEX was. And even though it was a buzzword at the time, I'm not sure that many people could explain it to me either. So one of the things that we were looking for was a model, some kind of a model that would help us, because at the time we had a vision of world-class performance in everything we do. So I was coming into a new role, which I knew we had to be world-class in, but didn't know what we were supposed to do or how to get there. And one of the first things, we went to the Shingo conference in Jaguar Land Rover in the UK. It was a Shingo Discover Excellence, and brought the site director, myself, and we kind of latched on to the Shingo. We liked the principles, we liked the insights, the ideal results require ideal behaviors, the purpose and systems, and obviously the principles. So that was, and it gave us a model, and it gave us a kind of a roadmap how we could do operational excellence. And if I flip back to this, if I was starting again, I mean, a model like this kind of clearly kind of outlines how we went about our journey. I think you obviously have to have the vision. And that was one of the first things we put in place, was the vision, the strategy, and then our own behaviors. What were the behaviors we wanted to see? And then obviously they were linked to Shingo principles. So the behavioral, I always think if the more time we spent on that, the better. And then there was a lot of trial and error after that. The way our journey worked was, then we put in the continuous improvement elements, like the visual management, the huddles, the problem solving, the proactive improvement systems. and leader standard work, management walk, and Gemba walks, which I termed our lean management system. And I think we just learned by doing in a lot of those areas. We opened our doors quite quickly for Discover Excellence workshops. And not that we were near ready Shingo Prize, but uh, we got a lot of people like yourselves in coming in, looking at the site and giving us very good feedback, which helped us improve. And then obviously the last system is the learning and development, the standard work updates, the coaching and training. And I suppose the only thing harder than implementing, I suppose, continuous improvement is sustaining it. And we would have seen, like after the Shingo Prize, we got rapid growth in the site, and it can be hard to sustain it. You have different managers coming in, but it was obvious that it was the right thing to do. And sometimes you take a step back to take two steps forward, and I think a lot of sustaining it as well is understanding the value it brought to our business. But in terms of leaders, I think again these are down to principles like time, people, customer, process, trust. These are all leadership principles. And one of the training we use is we have a lean leadership training, and it's supported by this book, People, a Leader's Day-to-Day Guide to Building and Managing and Sustaining Lean Organizations. And we find this quite a good training. It's relatively old now, and some of the media is dated, but one thing that doesn't change is the principles. The principles still hold true. And one of the quotes for this book, which I think is very important, is that like to be lean leaders, we have to do a lot of things: ask questions, make observations, reflect, challenge thinking, teach, coach, aid in development of tools, create value, solve problems, and grow people. So from that perspective, like, and then to run a business as well. So it just shows that, if we want to take on the challenge and if we want to call ourselves lean leaders, we have to engage in these things, and we have to engage in it as well in some kind of a structured manner, be part of leader standard work. But I think this just sums up what lean leadership is all about to me anyway. And it when you look at it and you see it and you say, well, do I do all these things on a daily and a weekly basis? Probably not. And that's why I think reflection is so important, to understand which ones you do well and which ones you not do so well, and then to try and improve ourselves as a leader. Um, I suppose if you look, I suppose the key thing, if you look at the behavior and strategy development, I think it's important, and I'm sure we've seen all versions of this before. But all these elements are important. The mission, why do we exist, the values, our behaviors, where are we going for, what is our vision in the near term, and then what's the strategy we're going to do, how do we measure ourselves, how do we roll down the targets and initiatives and into personal objectives. So kind of the why, with the vision, why we're doing it, because we want to be somewhere in a certain amount of time. The aggressive goals, what are the aggressive goals we're going to do? How do we get focus objectives? How do we get target and actions? And I think often what escapes us is, like, we often think, well, if the leaders know this, why do we need to communicate it? Like, if we have a strategy and we're doing it, why do we need to communicate this? And sometimes as leaders, this is something that I think we miss. We don't spend enough time communicating the vision and the strategy. And I think it's important, especially for this line. It creates that sense of purpose, loyalty, urgency, and unity. And I think we need, as leaders, to spend time doing that, so that everybody knows whether they're winning or losing. Then it helps in our lean management system, creating that gap. And obviously, this is universally enabler of OpEx. So in terms of our lean management system, I think some of these elements, like we have leader standard work going hand in hand with visual management, then the accountability, the daily management, the problem solving, and then the proactive improvements. I'll just touch briefly on some of these because I think you all know most of these already, but some of the things in terms of lean leadership, I think is seeing those gaps and then the accountability as a leader to own the gaps and then closing the gaps that everybody uh, doing proper structured problem solving. And then I suppose this whole thing makes sure that we as leaders, we need to be like present and we need to reinforce and standardize and reinforce the behaviors. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is not necessarily build good places to work. I think that's very important in it, but also high performing, accountable work teams that are continually improving. And I think that's really our job, that continuing improving and everybody in the organization, as Mike Martin and Own the Gap, improving the work is the work. Um, this would have been kind of our version of the B skill model. This would have been our lean management system. We would have been guided kind of on a high level by the Shingo principles, but we had our own behaviors. Some of these have changed over time. These aren't necessarily what would have been there when we won the Shingo Prize. But you had your behaviors, your mission, your strategic pillars, your strategic maps. Then they were broken down into team level. You had your visual management. Then you had your problem solving tools in terms of, then you had your proactive improvements, and then you had your leader standard work. So they would have been probably the 9 key elements of our system. And if we just take a few of these, one of the things is leader standard work. Um, and I think this is one of the ones that it can take time to implement, and I'll talk about that in a while. But the biggest thing though is that the lack of understanding of what leader standard work is in an organization. The amount of times that I would have got managers say, well, why do I need leader standard work? That's just my calendar. I'll print out what's in my calendar. But if you looked at the calendar, there probably wasn't enough time devoted to coaching and development or early identification of problems with the goal of eliminating firefighting. So I think one of the most fundamental things about it is that if leaders don't understand the principles and the why, then it's very difficult for them to buy into leader standard work. And I suppose a good quote from David Mann here, standard work not only specifies what the leader should do, it also by implication identifies what the leader should not be doing. And I think we obviously have only so many hours in the day, so we got to make sure that we're doing the right things with our time and thinking long term rather than necessarily short term. And some of the pitfalls that we've seen, and I suppose is well documented, and like I said earlier, it can be viewed as just a checklist rather than a structured and disciplined application of lean principles. Explaining the why can be very difficult if the leaders don't fully appreciate lean principles. It must come from the top. So again, sometimes, we don't see it all the way through the organization. And obviously, when we're in firefighting mode, and there will always be firefighting, there's no getting away from that. But it is then easy to justify not adhering to it. And we need to stabilize processes. So sometimes if you had poor processes, then obviously the first step was to stabilize those before you try and standardize it and force leader standard work. So again, I think a big thing about leader standard work that we would have seen would be that it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, if you're a senior manager or middle manager, and if you can only get 60% of it done, 60% is better than 0%, but also to reflect and reflect on man's quote. Is there things that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing? Can I make this up somewhere else? How can I make more time for the coaching, the development of people and so forth, and go into the Gemba? In terms of visual management, I think when we started, we were definitely a traditional system with lagging communication, problems allowed to stay hidden, isolation. We had continuous improvement, which was invisible, and information did not connect processes and people. Now, as we go to a digital age, and a lot has moved on, some of the boards that I show examples here are the old boards, and some of them we still use, but a lot has gone to digital and actually through real time. But I think the principles still stay the same. I think we still have to have the same principles and structures around it. And sometimes I think with the virtual communication, and we have too much data and we get bogged down in huddles and that problem solving when that should be left outside those meetings. So I think in the digital age, we just have to be careful that we still keep a discipline around our huddles, and that we still use the information to solve the problems, but we still need that communication. Are we winning or losing? And actions can be taken outside of the meeting. Problems are immediately exposed. It helps with teamwork, easy to see improvements, and information connects people and processes. This is an example of some of the boards that we would have around the organization. They were fairly simple. One of the big things we did, I think, was standardizing the boards. When we started out, we gave everybody a free rein on the boards, so that they could develop their own, but then it got very hard to see the wood from the trees when you went from board to board. So we kind of standardized on what's your team, what it means to win, what's your strategy, what's your schedule and tasks, your leader standard work. Are you winning or losing? How are you trending? Um, CI, and these are all the CI actions coming out, and then recognition is very important as well. So in 1 second, can you tell if you're winning or losing? 3 seconds, can you see a trend? 10 seconds, does everybody know what you're doing to improve? Now, these have moved on in various quarters, but essentially, if we were doing an OPEX assessment, we'd be still looking for these three elements. And another, I suppose, thing, and it's kind of related to leader standard work as well. I suppose the importance of a Gemba walk, and I think really the Gemba walk is that first bullet there, Gemba walks to nurture and develop the practice of lean and lean management through coaching of employees. So without very good structured Gemba walks, I think lean, it's very hard to sustain lean. So that leader standard work is that missing link, and between visual management and sustaining continuous improvement. And some of the benefits to employees is that feeling of being listened to and being heard. Their work, because some of the best ideas that we have come from frontline operators, because they know where the improvements are. It gives them that respect, ownership and pride, and then they see the leaders. They have regular communication with the leaders. And the benefit from a leader perspective is you're obviously empowering employees. We often, as leaders, get a much better understanding of the process. As was it Eisenhower said, that plowing is very easy if you're 1,000 miles from the cornfield and your plow is a pencil. So I think going there and actually seeing what you might think is a smooth process and how it works in reality, So you expose the issues. You're practicing your guiding principles, because often we do these lean leadership training, and it's quite good in theory, but then do we practice it? And if you don't practice anything, then you're not going to improve. And it exposes any grievances. And then if they're focus Gemba walks, their waste improvement walks, and their continuous improvement. So even if we think of the Shingo principles, I think these touch every principle. Obviously, it's showing respect for every individual. It's leading with humility. It's looking to seek perfection. You're embracing scientific thinking, or at least coaching it. It's focused on process. It's ensuring we have quality at source, and you're trying to improve flow and pull. So I think it takes quite a lot of principles, and I suppose how often do we see this little Gilbert cartoon where he keeps watering the plastic plants? So I think it's always people say, "Oh, we've taken the low-hanging fruit. There's no more low-hanging fruit." But then I see projects coming in and, making huge savings in terms of cost or quality. So I think there's no end to the low-hanging fruit if you look hard enough and if we learn to see. Um, and then I suppose the last element of the DB skill model is the learning and development. So from this tact knowledge and explicit knowledge and harder soft skills, I think the big thing is that, to be successful, you need to have both the hard and the soft skills. And this area here is much more effective. The on the job, the coaching, the in-house development programs is seen as much more effective learning. And I suppose if there was one thing to take away from this presentation, is the primary role of leaders is creating a learning organization through coaching and developing people to solve problems on a daily basis. And I think that's what we got to do as lean leaders, and that's our primary responsibility. And final slide, this is one of the SA Partners Improvement Journey. You got to stability behaviors, then moving into the more proactive, and then we're excellent. And I think you can go between one and the other, and you can go back and forth between them all. But I think we're all striving for we are excellent, and trying to get into that proactive zone and trying to stay there and trying to move towards we are excellent is what we're all striving for. And that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sean. Really appreciate that. I must admit, I was particularly struck by one of your comments at the very beginning about we need to spend as much time as possible on behaviours. I think that's very telling about your organisation. Obviously, that's the reason why you've been as successful as you have. And I think probably we can all sympathise with sustaining continuous improvement is the hard part. You can have some energy into it. So I was interested to hear you talk about how you sustain that journey. So thank you very much. We'll take some questions now. So if there's anything you would like to ask Sean, please either raise your hand or drop a note in the chat. I don't really mind which you use, so please put those out there. But just to kick us off, Sean, on the last slide there, you talked about where you are in the journey. Are you in the red, yellow or green? Are you in excellence, or are you still in firefighting mode? What would you say were the key things that allowed Abbott to move between those zones? I'm assuming you moved up to the green.
Yeah, well, I hopefully we're touching on it. I'm sure we go back into the orange as well. It's the sustaining it. Yeah, I think for us, I think the first thing was the journey, that it is a journey. Embracing the principles, understanding the principles. I think one of the big things we did was we got all our senior managers to do Shingo Discover workshops, but at different sites. For obviously, we didn't have infinite resources, so we got some in-house training done as well. But we found that if your senior leaders understand the principles and see them in action at different sites, I think that that's very helpful. So I think that was the first thing, trying to get the principles embedded. And then we had a long-term investment in training and education, not with much cost though, because often if we hosted Discover Excellence, you'd get people, we'd host the event, but you'd get your people trained. But the most training was when trainees were going down and talking to people and asking insightful questions. That was the biggest training, and that was where the penny dropped for people, where they were saying, okay, that's why we have the visual boards. That's why people are interested in this. So that kind of reinforcement that we were doing the right thing by the positive feedback, but also the constructive feedback by people doing those courses. The other thing was, I suppose, when we got mature and when we got, say, the prize, there was a lot more sites in our division. So we developed our own internal, which we call our Pinnacle Operational Excellence Assessment Model, and we use that to assess other sites. So that was a learning experience as well in terms of other sites coming up to speed. And I think we have in one of those papers, we describe a model like, what do you want to do? Ideally, you want to adapt rather than adopt. And I think when we went with those sites, we tried to say, okay, you need structure, you need to look at your behaviors, but we left them with the room to adapt. On hindsight, maybe that was something that we wrote back on a bit, because if people are early in their journey, I think they probably have to adopt some things first and try them and then adapt them later. And I think what we got all sites with all nice behaviors that actually said the same thing, but they were different. So when you're in a division, you want to bring everybody together. You want to have enterprise excellence throughout the division. So later we came back and we standardized those behaviors then, and then we have standardized shared behaviors across the division now. So I think that was an important thing. And I suppose all that really is experiment. I think the most important thing was we experimented, we tried it. We weren't perfect. We did a plan, do, check, act. We tried to improve it, and we're still not perfect, but we're, I suppose, mature enough to be able to reflect on what's working well and what's not working well and what's adding value. And I think the metrics are a big reason behind that as well. I think we have to have, like the key behavioral metrics and that, but also we need quality. I think it's not how many A3s you do, it's, are your A3s effective and are they driving improvement trends in your results?
Gosh, I've got so many other questions after all that information. But I tell you what, I see a hand up and a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll hold my thoughts and let's go to Garrett. I think you were first.
Thanks, Rachel, and hi, Sean. It's a great insight there you're after showing us. The one question I have for you is that when you started the journey, you would have had a lot of, I suppose, part of that journey. How do you onboard new people that's coming into the business now when you're pretty very mature on where you're at?
Yeah, well, we still have certain training in place. I think it's actually nearly easier to do it now, Garrett, than it was, because it's actually live now. So when we started the journey, we were bringing people through training and so forth, and there wasn't really huddles, there wasn't any visual management. Now when people come on board, like they're straight into huddles, they're straight into, so they're living it. And if they're living it, and especially if it's their new job, that's just the way things are done around here. We also have a lot of courses like for inductees, we have lean fundamental training. So everybody gets that theoretical background as well. But I would say they learn a lot more by actually living the system than they do through the training courses. And from a leader's perspective as well, all our leaders do the lean leader training, which is very much focused on the principles. And again, they're immersed in it as well because those structures are there already. And I suppose it's really their reports that are teaching them if they need teaching on those principles and how things are done. So yeah, I think the big challenge, though, I suppose, was after the Shingo Prize when the factory grew in size so much, like it doubled, if not tripled the size. That was the more challenging times because you had people moving to different roles and so forth. So that's when it was most difficult to sustain it because you had so many people being onboarded together and so forth. Now that it's more of a stable workforce and there's less mass recruitment, I think it's much easier.
How did you, just to follow up on that quickly, you talked about bringing someone in is straightforward, but when you grew a lot, how did you cope with that growth? And I presume, I like your honesty where that was hard. How did you make sure that that didn't impact how you worked overall?
I would say it probably had an impact. There's no doubt about it. We would have seen that we would have, from our own internal OPEX assessments, we would have seen a disimprovement in OPEX. But that was a learning experience as well. That was a learning experience that we have to get back to basics. And like that, there's no more greater firefight than rapidly upscaling a plant or a new plant startup. And obviously, then I think the realization came that the only way to improve the results is get back to what worked well for us in the past, because in the years that we were going for the Shingo Prize, we were a lot more stable organization in terms of we've been through startup, we've been through quite a lot, so it was the right time to do it. If we had to try and do it in the middle of a massive program like that, I don't think it would have worked. So going back to the point is that you do need to stabilize your processes as a start, and then I think the advantage that we had was that we'd seen it work in the past. So you didn't need to focus as much time on the principles. People understood the principles, but was getting back to the time to execute on them and so forth.
Excellent. I like the way you said you had an audit, so you could understand and pick that up. So I think that sounds like a really good tool. Anyway, I'll stop talking. Robert Lopez, you had a couple of questions, I think, in the chat. Do you want to come online and
Sure. Happy to. Yeah, kind of related, but first and foremost, given your long journey and when senior leaders change, can drastically change, anything that's going on in an organization. So what were some of the challenges that you saw with senior leader changes and how'd you overcome them?
Yeah, I think when we went first, like when we went for the Shingo Prize, we did it as an isolated site. We did it as one site. And we had a very supportive leadership team. So that was very, very important. Then obviously later leaders move on to different things, and you get new leaders in, and sometimes, like I described, you do get that fallback. But I think once there's enough critical mass in there to remember how the things were done, if every leader they wouldn't remember. There was like a pushback. Look, we have to get back to our structures. We have to get back to what we're doing. So that would be like probably an example from a more established site. For new sites, I think one of the biggest things we did is our operational excellence assessments, because it is really down to the site leaders. And I suppose in any any big organization, we're results driven as well. And having an assessment and having a bit of internal competition as well is something that's very important. And having our senior leader bought into it and actually standing up at a meeting and saying, guys, this isn't a nice to have. This is how we're going to run our business. I think that drives the rest. So if you have that, it's absolutely imperative that the highest leader in your organization is bought into it, and then that can by its own actions drive the culture. And then um, I think there's a lot of internal competition as well, and a lot is this regular assessment kind of make it quantifying, because it's easy to stand up and give the dog and pony show and say we've done this and that. But with these assessments, it's very much going to the front line. So anything that's said in the boardroom is fully validated. So I think doing those assessments then kind of reinforce it, so you can see if it's real or not. And then obviously publishing those, and that drives that culture and that importance, that this is important to us. But again, it's you have to have the top level leader supporting you, otherwise it's not going to work.
Right. No, thank you for validating what I've seen and what I've experienced and what I've been preaching. So that's very helpful. What other measures, early on measures, obviously assessments, making them public, were also critical in the early journey. Is there other key measures that you feel really helped, that eventually drove the measures that are important to senior leaders and corporate functions or corporate office?
Yeah, I think the whole structure around Shingo, and when our pinnacle operational excellence assessment is very much modeled on the principles, but rather than calling out the principles, which may be abstract to some people, we actually call out the processes. So, and the other thing is we'd standardize them against our own internal behaviors or our own internal competencies. So if you look at things like we have built in our operational excellence assessment, which is really cultural enablers, and it's probably something that we're fairly strong at. But the things like that we look for there is EHS&E number one, so, and as well, we have a lot of internal competitions around EHS&E. For example, Abbott has EHS plant of the year, it has quality plant of the year. And that's not just confined to our division, that's confined to the whole organization. So that's driving those standards. And one thing, when I came into Abbott and going into my new role in 2012 from being a technical manager, was my vision, as well as being, say, world class at OPEX, was if we could make the OPEX culture like the EHS culture, then we know we've won, because there was a really, really strong EHS culture there. So kind of calling out those things. So in terms of build, things I can think of off heart is EHS. It's the people development. And there's quite a lot of people development done. And then we can measure things like development plans, activity around development plans, performance reviews. The other thing was reward and recognition. So we obviously measure a lot of reward and recognition. We have good global systems on reward and recognition, and both digital and paper. Then we have things like trust and humility. One of the things that we do across Abbott now, which has really, really worked very effectively, is a Your Voice Count survey. And that gets the voice of the employees against some of the major things. And that's really a trust survey, a morale survey. And that's one of the things we measure in the assessment. And the other thing is employee engagement. Are we engaging employees in ideation? Green bells, yellow bells, particularly yellow bells is very important. So they'd be kind of some of the behavioral metrics we'd be looking to see. And then going into the continuous improvement elements, we have things like project management. We're looking for good change management in terms of bringing about change. Quality, we're looking at how we plan and control. We're looking at perfect equipment and perfect products. So all of those, they need to have the results indicators, either KPIs or KBIs, which kind of is evidence that we are continuing to improve in those elements. So I think it wasn't just a pinnacle score or an OPEX score. We look for what are the elements of the model that we're doing well in, and what are the elements we could improve in. And when the model set up first, I was thinking, okay, some sites will be very good at this, other sites will be good at this. And actually they weren't. No matter how mature they were in their journey, we found that what we were good at probably across all sites, because it was being driven divisionally. And the things that we could improve at, we were probably, okay, we might have been slightly better in some sites than others, but I think they were the things that we needed to improve as a division. So then that made it actually very easy in that now when we bring out improvements, we focus on those areas and we do it as a division. So I often lead, say, cross-site teams on a specific focus area. So we're trying to raise the water together and raise all boats together rather than trying to do it in silos and competition against each other. And I think that's very effective.
Excellent. It's interesting, like you said, the impetus from division, and it goes back to the competition, I suppose, across the sites. You want to be the site that's involved in that. Fiona, you've got a question. Are you able to unmute and raise your question? Maybe not. The question, I think, relatively straightforward, but really useful to give us some examples of 3 behaviours. So what are the sorts of behaviours that you have? Oh, there we are. Fiona's come off mute. No.
Yeah, it was just, we've talked about behaviours a lot and how powerful it is. I just wondered if you could share with us, say, the top 3 behaviours that you found the most powerful, perhaps, in moving up the improvement journey.
Yeah, I suppose on a personal level, I suppose the most fundamental one, and I think it's fundamental to Shingo, is respect. I think that's obviously the most fundamental one. If you don't have that, you're going nowhere. And obviously respect and humility are kind of similar in ways. So that respect is vital. I think for a leader is to challenge thinking, because, especially in big organizations, you will get a lot of, oh, this is the way we've always done it. So that challenge thinking. And then I think the biggest one, which I certainly didn't do enough of and which I try to do more, is reflection. I don't think we give ourselves enough time to reflect on our own performance as leaders, but also on our processes and so forth. We put them in. But I'm not sure we reflect enough. So I think for me, they were the things in terms of the leadership behaviours we look for in Abbott and that we've unified on. There's things like lifelong learning is one of them. And that can mean different things to different people. That can be somebody doing a degree or somebody upskilling educational wise, but it could be somebody learning problem solving, somebody in A3, somebody putting in an idea. So that's a key behavior for us, is lifelong learning. Another one would be respect, and would be one of them as well. Another one is customer. Obviously, customer is front and center for us. And for our particular business, we're in the diagnostics business, so we used to have, say, if your bloods are tested in different labs, say, if you take Ireland, every lab hospital in Ireland would have an analyzer. Now it's gone where analyzers are in big laboratories and they service whole countries. So our customer base is getting smaller, but much bigger. So we really need to drive customer solutions. We try to do a lot with our customer. We try to be as relevant and to understand our customers as much as possible. So that's a big behavior for us. And then another big behavior is accountability in one team, that we're one team and that we are accountable. So they'd be the kind of the four things that we'd be looking for. So I suppose if you summarize that, the lifelong learning is continuous improvement of yourself and the business. There's the customer element of it. There's the respect, and a part of that respect is everybody involved in CI, continuous improvement, and then being accountable and one team, no silos.
Fantastic. Great answer. Thanks very much, Sean.
No problem.
Can I just follow that up quickly with a follow-up question? You said before that you standardise behaviours, and those all sounds like things that everybody in the business should be working towards. Absolutely. How did you make those relevant to everyone in the company, though?
Yeah. So first of all, the first thing that we did was we benchmarked all the behaviors across the site, and then we came up with the new behaviors collectively. And it's the LEAD acronym, lifelong learning, the first one, empower and then encourage, and then there's the LEAD, LE, A is the accountability, and the D is deliver customer focused results. So I would have taken then all the behaviors that we would have at every site, like there was pride, there was spirit, there was a lot of acronyms, and actually put them into them. So you could, each one of them actually link to one of those. So one of the first things was, we're not doing any different here. Your behaviors are changing, but they're not changing. It's the same behaviors, but instead of having maybe 5, you have 4, but your old respect is still in these behaviors. So that buy-in. The other thing, it has to be part of our system. So reward and recognition is very important. So if we are ever rewarding somebody or recognizing somebody, it's imperative that we call out the behavior we're rewarding them from. And like what you'd see quite a lot of sites is you'd have that lead on the wall, and we'd have, say, a board, say, going into the canteen where you'd stick up peer-to-peer recognition, where there isn't huge amount, it's more recognition than reward, but some of those then are taken off in reward, and then those people that get on that board then move into site director awards and so forth. But what we do is we ask the people to link what you're recognizing the person to those behaviors. So at the end of the month, the board is full, then we take them all down and it goes up again. And actually you can quantify, see as well, that maybe we're recognizing people more for one behavior than the other. So it helps you as well, even visually say, maybe we need to encourage some of the other behaviors. The other thing, I think it has to be linked right through your human value stream or people value stream, in terms of, when you employ somebody and you're doing, say, the STAR model for interviewing, that you're focusing that they have demonstrated those behaviors previously, or that they're open to demonstrating those behaviors. And as well, it should be part of the performance review. There should be feedback against those behaviors. Now, some of our performance review are corporate based, so they'd be more corporate, but then we can link like the corporate to our divisional. So again, the feedback at performance review, the recognition, the internal recruitment, all of those systems have to link to the behaviors. And obviously then from an executive standpoint and a leadership standpoint, those behaviors like are the first thing up in any presentation, slide decks, whatever.
Excellent. It certainly sounds clear that they're part of the fabric of what you do and embedded in a variety of different systems. So all very impressive. I think someone has dropped off, but they put a couple of questions in the chat. I think Elsa's covered off the 1-3-10 rule conversation, so thank you very much for that, Elsa. But there was a second question, which I think I'm interested in finding out the answer. But is there any particular coaching style that your leaders use?
We have two things really. One is the grow model. A lot of our leaders use that grow model, that coaching tool. And another thing that we've done, and I don't know how applicable this is, it might be, I know it's in Ireland, it's quite across Abbott, it would have started in Ireland. The training is called the mindful leader. And most of our leaders get that mindful leader training. And that is very much, looking at leadership styles. And I don't know whether you've heard of something called a drama triangle. So it's very much on that, and trying to move people from the drama across the drama triangle. So like the nurturing mother, are we over nurturing our people? Are we spoon feeding them? We don't want to do that. Then we don't want to be the dominant father either, the parent. So so all that drama triangle kind of makes you reflect on your own leadership styles, and are we too much of a nurturing mother, or maybe too much of a dominant father? And then do we lead to drama when issues, why does it always happen to me, kind of a thing, rather than looking at it. So they'd be the two big programs that we would have initiated, and I think they're very vital. One more of leadership styles, and we have a corporate program as well called Leading with Impact. So we do spend a lot of time on leader development. And one of the things, I suppose, the good things about Abbott in Ireland is there's about 5 or 6 different divisions of Abbott in Ireland, but we are one from a HR perspective as Abbott Ireland. So if we go on training courses or whatever, leadership training courses, we would do it as an Abbott Ireland team. So we'd be meeting peers from the other sites, the other divisions, learning from them. And typically part of the projects there, like when I was a technical manager, so when I did one of those leadership courses, we had to do a project which took us outside of our comfort zone. So I think mine was developing a strategy and a vision for our site. And this was before OPEX at all. And it certainly would have been outside my comfort zone, because I would have been a technical person. But I suppose it learned two things. It kind of showed me that maybe I could do some of that stuff as well, and it gave me an interest in that. But the other thing, I suppose, it was an exposure for leaders. It was to say, well, maybe this guy has something to offer more than just the technical side. So I think those kind of things give people that get coming outside your comfort zone and an opportunity to show maybe different sides of your skill set.
Fantastic. You've answered another question around how did you make the learning apply, but it sounds like you do project work for all the learning that you do.
Yeah, that'd be big. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much for all those fabulous questions, and thank you very much to Sean. I'll hand back to Elsa.
Really great